We are moving to German territories, and the topic of the next presentation of Professor Bernd Kannowski from the Bayreuth University is the German Goldene Bulle from 1356.
Well, thank you for the warm words of introduction, and my thanks to the organizers for inviting me here. I'm glad and honored to be here today. Well, the official name of today's German constitution is not German constitution or Constitution of Germany. It is called Grundgesetz, which is something like basic law in German. It would go too far and contribute nothing to our topic to explain here why its creators back in 1949 did not call it constitution. However, what the German word Grundgesetz means, that is related to our topic here indeed very much, because it is simply the German translation of the Latin leges, no, the singular, lex fundamentalis. Well, since the Middle Ages, this has been the name of particularly important laws that were understood as the basic order of the old Holy Roman Empire. You can see that in, can you? No, not there. That's how, yeah. This is an edition from the 18th century, and this is the Latin, like leges fundamentalis, and then it gives the whole stuff in German again, Grundgesetze. So this is where the word comes from. And well, as these, they were shown in large volumes like this that you can see on the screen. And one of these Grundgesetze, one of these basic laws, perhaps the most important one of all, was the Golden Bull, which is the subject of my presentation here today. It remained in force from 1356 until the end of the Old Empire in 1806, which is exactly 450 years. So it's a bit different from what Professor Baker said and what Aniceto said. It wasn't that it was passed at some point, then important, then lost significance, then was reinstalled at some point. It was in force all the time. It was important all the time. It was the order, the basic order of that empire in all the years to come. Well, when Germans today think of their present constitution, which is, as I said, not called constitution, but Grundgesetz, basic law, they think first and foremost, and this is what pupils are taught in school in Germany, if they're taught anything about the law at all, they will be taught about the beginning of the German Grundgesetz, which is well, the fundamental rights, which is what you will find there in the very beginning. But the Golden Bull, however, unlike the English Magna Carta, at least according to its later understanding, has nothing to do with such freedoms which are granted to a larger group of people. This is not what it is about. Thus, the Golden Bull has no place in the history of civil and human rights. It is rather, as I said, the basic order of that Holy Roman Empire, primarily concerned with a very important question, with the election of its very leader, which is, of course, the German king. The central question is who may elect him and how this election exactly is to take place. In regulating these matters, the Golden Bull does not establish completely new law in terms of content in the first place. It much more lays down what has been in practice already for quite a long time. So the similarity in name with the Hungarian document, what is this conference, or what is the occasion of this conference, is rather an external circumstance, because the German document of 1356 was hung with a golden seal, which of course was there to show this is something particularly important, something very important, that's why. And this is called, well, the Latin word for this is aurea bulla, which is of course in German golden bull, goldene Bulle, which is, however, not what it was called in the beginning. It was called this about 100 years later, like in the 15th century. The contemporary designation by the king who passed the Golden Bull, which was the German King Charles IV, he called it our Imperial Law Book. And, well, as the name Law Book suggests, this is not a very short text, which can be written down on a single piece of parchment, like, for instance, the English Magna Carta, or these even shorter texts that Aniceto has told us about. It is rather a small book that fills just under 50 pages in the print edition today. I bought this in the internet. It was €1.67, which must be 650 forint or something. I bought a sandwich in a local supermarket yesterday. That was 700. It's incredible what people throw into the bin today. So if you want to get an impression, I will just pass this round. You mind? This 50-page text, it did not come into being at once, but in two steps. It was created on two different legislative acts by this king I already mentioned, Charles IV, who bore this title, King of Germany, from 1346 until his death in 1378. The first part of the Golden Bull was promulgated at the Nuremberg Diet on January 10th, 1356, and the second at a diet in Metz, which is situated in France today, on Christmas Day of the very year 1356. So it's all from 1 year. In the old Holy Roman Empire, it had actually been practiced since its very early days that the king was elected. However, there were a number of uncertainties about how exactly that was to take place, about the procedure. So time and again, these led to unpalatable situations, which were there were different groups of voters, so there were different people elected as kings. And this created a situation of doubt, of course, about the head of the empire, which is a crucial question, and these could only be solved militarily, which means war. That didn't happen that seldom. The last time there had been a situation like this, solution in the battlefield, was the controversy between Frederick the Fair of the House of Habsburg and Louis the Bavarian of the House of Wittelsbach in 1314. Well, the Bavarian, Louis the Bavarian, won, and his rival and successor, which was this king who passed the Golden Bull, Charles IV, he brought such disputes to a permanent solution forever. There never was a situation like this after the Golden Bull, because the Golden Bull, on a permanent basis, solved all these questions. Royal legislation. However, at the time of Charles IV, it was by no means a matter of course that kings would legislate at all. In the Hohenstaufen period, like Barbarossa, about 200 years ago from then, the German monarchs had begun to claim this power for themselves. Frederick Barbarossa had come to an arrangement with the four doctors, the Quatuor Doctores of Bologna, who, in return for privileges, designated him the emperor of the world, Dominus Mundi, according to the standards of the Roman law. Within the framework of a continued existence of the ancient Roman Empire, the Translatio Imperii, the German kings now saw themselves as the legitimate successors of the Roman rulers. And according to a common saying at the time, they preserved the law in the shrine of their hearts, in scrigno pectoris. Thus, the Golden Bull was by no means solely about conflict resolution. The king staged himself as a lawmaker and thus presented a new side of his power, novas leges condere, to make new laws. This was a right reserved to him alone, perhaps still to the Pope. However, it's precisely the Pope who is not mentioned in a word in the Golden Bull, so that the king certainly triumphed against him in this aspect. The first part of the Golden Bull, written in Nuremberg, regulates an entire election procedure in great detail. The document explicitly lists who must do what, when, where, under what circumstances, not only for the electors, but also for the inhabitants of Frankfurt, where the election was to be held. Likewise, the Golden Bull deals with the arrival of the electors in Frankfurt and says for the surrounding princes who was to grant whom free conduct through their territory. The decision to hold the election in Frankfurt bears witness to a tradition that goes back to the days of the East Frankish Empire. According to this tradition, both the election and the coronation were to be held on Frankish soil. The location of the election is not the only one to be specified in the Golden Bull. It also states that the coronation should take place in Aachen, and that the first imperial diet after the coronation in Nuremberg. The election had to be completed after 30 days. If this was not the case, the electors were to be given only bread and water to eat from then on until they had reached a decision. And as a matter of fact, they were not allowed to leave Frankfurt any earlier. One of the most famous provisions of the Golden Bull definitely establishes the electors themselves, which was supposed to avoid double voting and inconclusive results in the future. There are 7 electors, and thus an odd number, which rules out a stalemate. It's impossible. These are 4 secular and 3 ecclesiastical ones. The Golden Bull stipulates majority voting for the first time at imperial level. 4 out of 7 votes should be sufficient to elect a new king. The others must then follow this majority. The electorates were declared indivisible, so it should be clear for all future how many votes there would be and who should have them. In this respect, the Golden Bull is a milestone for the emergence of independent and stable states, which was to manifest itself almost 300 years later in the Peace of Westphalia. So the 7 electors are, in this order it is given, the Archbishop of Cologne, the one of Mainz, of Trier, then the King of Bohemia, which was Charles IV himself in his days, the Count Palatine of the Rhine, the Duke of Saxony, and the Margrave of Brandenburg. If you ever come to Nuremberg, be in front of the Frauenkirche, the Church of Our Lady, because there will be a spectacle with a mechanical astronomical clock, which is called in German Männleinlaufen, which means something like the walking around of little man or something. And this will show all 7 electors appear in front of Charles IV with a trumpet and a drum. It's quite a funny thing to watch, actually. And, well, and this is connected with my story here because it is about the electors and the Golden Bull. And that was erected in the days of Charles IV, which means 1360s, 70s. It broke at some point, and the clock that you can see today dates back to, I think, 1506. So it's more than 500 years old. Why is it exactly these 7 princes that are named in the Golden Bull? Why are they considered that important out of all? This is not clear until today. Well, they have not held this privilege to be electors since the Golden Bull, as I said. The Golden Bull codifies things that have been in practice for a very long time. Already in the Sachsenspiegel, the Saxonian Mirror from 1230, precisely these 7 princes are mentioned as the king electors. But however, this does not give an explanation. Why is it these 7? It only dates back to question 130 years. So why is it so? There's an older view that wants to explain this with a so-called arch office theory, Erzämtertheorie in German. This underlines that these 7 princes have outstanding functions in the government and administration of the empire or in informal court sessions. Thus, the Archbishop of Trier is the Chancellor of Gaul, of France, the Archbishop of Cologne, the Chancellor of Italy, and the Archbishop of Mainz, which is the most important one, is the Chancellor of, well, Germania, Germany, if you want to translate it like this. It's not really easy to translate what it means in that context. Of the German-speaking part of the empire, we'll come back to that. And the secular electors, they had traditional functions in the royal banquet. So the Count Palatine of Rhine had to serve the food, the King of Bohemia the drinks, the Margrave of Brandenburg had to take care for accommodation of the guests, and the Duke of Saxony of the horses. This may all seem quite plausible in the medieval way, but again, it only shifts the problem. Now the question arises, why is it exactly these 7 who hold these offices? So, The theory of arch offices somehow goes round in circles and doesn't really give an explanation. One explanation that does not go round in circles is the theory of the Ottonian daughter tribes. This theory has a certain charm because it aims at some point of a sort of medieval gender parity. It says that the electors could be genealogically traced back to daughters from the house of the Ottonians, which was between 900 and 1000, roughly, who did not get a chance in the election of kings because they were women and only men can be elected kings. In Germany, at least, in the old Germany. As a kind of compensation for this lack of power, they would then have been given the right to at least have a weighty say in the selection of the ruler. However, the research on this is extremely complex and almost incomprehensible in detail if you haven't dealt with that for decades. It's really complicated. But however, that might be an explanation. In addition to the regulation of the election of the king, which takes up most of the space in the Golden Bull, there are also some less far-reaching provisions. For example, the king was keen to push back the influence of the powerful confederation of cities, which had caused his great predecessor, whom I already mentioned, Barbarossa, serious problems 180 years earlier. In this respect, the Golden Bull strengthens the position of the nobility and the king at the expense of the communal movement. Likewise, the Golden Bull weakens the position of the Pope, who is, as I already said, not mentioned at all, which means he's not supposed to have any say whatsoever in the election of the king, which is definitely not something which could be considered self-evident in those days. Well, how does that come? Since Pope Innocent VI at the time needed support from the king, Charles IV, in a military conflict, he just did not dare to say anything. He did not want to jeopardize the good relations because he needed the soldiers, so he didn't object in any way. It is thus, quite a clever move of Charles IV because he used a moment of weakness of his opponent to lay down a right for himself in constitutional law forever. In constitutional law that was so important that it was called the Golden Bull and considered the basic order of that ancient Holy Roman Empire. This first part of the Golden Bull, it's called the Nuremberg Law. I mentioned earlier 2 diets, one in Nuremberg, the other one in Metz. That was passed in Nuremberg on January the 10th, 1356. The second part, the Metz Law, this is not about the election. It is rather about something that we might call a diplomatic protocol today, like who is to sit where and things. This is still important today, of course. I don't know, at home with my children, there's often a discussion who is to sit where and next to whom. It's crazy in a way, but that was much more important in the Middle Ages. It regulates seating arrangements, for instance, many other things, but I mean, in the limited time, just an example. It says that on a formal banquet, the king is to sit alone at a table, which is 6 feet, which is about 2 meters, higher than all the other tables in the hall. His wife is to sit on his right side, 3 feet lower, 1 meter below him. And on the ground floor, there will be the 7 electors, everyone alone on a table, and no one is ever entitled to sit next to them and share a table with them. What the Golden Bull has in common with the document that Aniceto mentioned earlier, it also was, they must have done several in those days, it was exactly in 2013, included in the Memory of the World Register by UNESCO. And today, we still have 7 original copies, just as many as there are electors, so many copies have survived, of the Golden Bull from the days of Charles IV. And the only one of this, which is still in its original place today, is the version that the citizens of my hometown, Frankfurt, received at the time. It's the only one. However, the fact that it is still there and it does still exist at all is truly great luck and ultimately a pure coincidence when Adolf Hitler visited Frankfurt in 1938, the National Socialist city government insisted on presenting the Frankfurt original copy of the Golden Bill to the Führer as a gift. But, well, in the end, he wasn't given the Golden. I think the guard argued it's an exposition and we cannot open the box and things, so they said, all right, it's okay. When Adolf Hitler only gets a German translation from the 15th century, which is bad enough since this valuable document disappeared and is now gone forever. So it may be a divine providence that the 14th century Latin original is not among the many losses suffered as a result of National Socialism and the Second World War. Even though Charles IV succeeded in consolidating the royal position of power through the Golden Bull, he was not able to assert himself in every point. The privileges of the electors were also consolidated and recognized. But however, as I said, Charles IV was himself one of the electors, so that wasn't a bad thing for him. In this way, important regional rulers were able to permanently secure their position in a central document of the imperial constitution. The feudalism that was to shape Germany and still does today became finds its expression here. Germany never became a centralized state like England or France, which has its advantages and disadvantages as well, of course. In any case, cultural and linguistic diversity was already in place in 1356. This expressed in a regulation on language instructions for the electors' sons who were to take their places at some point. In addition to their German mother tongue, they were to receive education in Latin, Italian, and Slavic, which presumably means Czech in those days. When they turned 7, and by the age of 14, they were supposed to be perfect in these languages and to master them all. So, the Holy Roman Empire was multilingual and multicultural, and for medieval kings, this apparently was not a problem at all. Thank you so much.